Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Healthy Living live stream. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kaufman. Today, we are going to mix things up a little bit and take questions. And we, of course, would welcome questions about my recent True Masculinity series and any topics related to men's health, or my new offering, the True Masculinity Fellowship, which you can find the links to below. All right, Alexander, shall we get started?
Definitely. Looking forward to it. Let's start with a question from Man at Talk. The question nobody is asking: is there a blood or saliva test that would unequivocally determine if someone has the mRNA in their body or vascular system?
I imagine you're talking about people who received experimental pharmaceutical injections. And unequivocally is kind of a difficult thing because generally the tests that are used are antibody tests, and an antibody has to be first determined to be specific for a certain substance, and that validation is lacking with the commercially used antibodies. Now, of course, the mRNA can actually itself be isolated, and then it can undergo sequencing because that's the same way that all DNA and RNA sequences are determined. So there could be certainly ways to do this that could be as close as you could get to unequivocal, but I'm not aware of any data that actually shows this that I would trust that's out there. But please, if you find any published studies, feel free to send them to the contact page on my website, and I will take a look.
All right, excellent. We have an interesting question from Alex SD. What would you recommend as male sexual enhancers? I believe he's referring to natural aphrodisiac.
Well, I think women are the main object that would increase your desire, but I don't really recommend using natural substances to enhance arousal. Well, the way I would look at this issue is that if there are problems interfering with your libido or fulfilling, your normal function in a relationship, then you want to determine what is the underlying cause so that you can address that directly. And of course, there are a myriad of psychological factors, especially, history of sexual trauma or rejection or shame issues or many other issues that can come into play. And then there are physical issues, and these could also be varied. They could be mostly vascular type issues. It could be related to metabolic disease like diabetes. And there could be also a buildup of xenoestrogens that are causing problems in sexual functioning and in sexual hormones. So it's really kind of a difficult question to answer because there are so many potential underlying factors to look at.
All right, interesting. Let's go to a question from Michael Turner. This was a question from one of the True Masculinity miniseries episodes. He asked, which form of Shilajit is better, capsules, drops, or the resin?
Okay, well, this is definitely a good question, and perhaps it'll help if I explain what Shilajit is like in its raw form, because it's kind of like dirt or rocks, small rocks. And then the way it's generally processed is that it would be suspended and dissolved in pure water, like distilled water. And then it will be put through some kind of filtration, like vacuum filtration is the process that the Shilajit we sell goes through. And then what you're left with is essentially, depending on how much liquid you use, you're left with a solution that could be of varying concentrations. And then you can process that in various ways. So you can dry it further, and that's what allows this kind of tarry residue to form that is a very common formulation of Shilajit. In my opinion, that it's a little bit difficult to work with because it's all sticky and stringy, and you can't use volumetric devices like a measuring spoon to measure your dose. You really need to weigh it to be accurate or approximate it. And most people, recommend just this kind of approximation of a, pea-sized amount or something akin to that. When you add more water instead of drying it out, then it becomes less thick and tarry and eventually becomes a liquid solution. And a liquid solution is easier to measure because you can use things like a dropper. And a dropper is, quite precise. There's 0.05 milliliters that come out with a standardized dropper, so you can get a much more precise dose if you start with a known concentration in the solution. So that's why I sell the product in that formulation. It's really just because of the ease of dosing and use. I think some of the capsules are either have the tarry version or it's further dried out into more of a pitch that could be more easily packaged inside capsules. But I have not ever personally experienced those formulations. So it's the tarry substance and the liquid that I'm most familiar with.
All right. We have a question from a very known guest, a friend of yours, Andy, conspiracy music guru.
Oh, it's great to hear from you, Alex.
Good afternoon, Andrew. How do you get rid of a beer belly?
Well, aside from liposuction, you could drink less or stop drinking beer. But, in all seriousness, when we have abdominal obesity, I think one of the main things that's going on is that the body is storing fat-soluble toxins. So, and of course, there are dietary factors, because if you're, for example, having a diet where you mix fats and carbohydrates, both at high amounts, together, you can end up, storing a lot of the fat in fatty tissue. Also, if you have a lot of seed oils in your diet, which really is a fat-soluble toxin, those are not metabolized exactly the same way as other dietary fats. And when there's an excess, we can then have a buildup of oxidation species, but also increased fat storage. So there are a number of factors, but, if you change your diet to a very clean whole foods diet, and, for optimal fat loss, I would recommend a very low carb or no carb diet, like a ketogenic diet, a ketovore diet, or a carnivore diet, for excellent results. But you can also have fat loss with a high carbohydrate, low fat diet. But over time, you'll be deficient in fat soluble vitamins, which could cause other health problems. So that's only really good for a limited amount of time, which may be, months to a couple of years, but eventually the deficiency is going to result in some additional health problems. But also, if you undergo a general detox protocol, and this could be, as simple as doing some enemas for a couple of weeks, either water enemas or coffee enemas, while you have a very clean diet. You would temporarily increase your water intake to help your body detox, because you'll lose a lot of water during the detox period. You could do a fast, which could be, 3 to 7 days. There are many ways to do a generalized detox. But if you combine these things, you'll definitely have major results. And please do also, get in touch with me privately, and I'll be able to custom tailor that information for you.
Absolutely. Let's go to Y2 Kazan. Are stents fraud, and can stents be avoided?
Well, let's not necessarily address the fraud issue, but stents misunderstand what's really going on with cardiovascular disease and are sort of a way of dealing with the end result, like putting a Band-Aid on the situation. So they sometimes can result in temporarily improved symptoms, but they don't address the underlying cause. And generally what happens is that they have to put more stents or take further action over time in order to because the symptoms will come back, or the same problem will just become more widespread over time unless you address the underlying issue. The other thing about stents is that they can be a substrate for blood clots to form. And that is something, that's really what they call iatrogenic. It's caused by the intervention. So that is something that has to be addressed once you have this, foreign material inside your blood vessels.
Right. A question from Brian. Apologies for mispronouncing that. What is your what is your opinion on eating raw meat?
Well, I occasionally enjoy a variety of raw meat, which I've had, like steak tartare, beef carpaccio. Occasionally, if I'm, trimming or cutting up a steak, I might take a little slice and just nibble on it. And, I'm certainly familiar with Agnes von der Planet's work, and have actually met some raw carnivores that I've had either as a client or that I've met at a conference. And they were, those guys were generally, athletes or bodybuilders, and were super healthy. So I don't, if you have good quality meat, I don't think there's any health risks or problems. There is some debate about how absorbable things are, but it is, should be relatively easy to digest in its raw form. But some people would say that cooked meat makes it easier to digest and more of the nutrients available. So there is some debate. But I certainly am a big advocate of raw dairy if you're going to have dairy in your diet. And I include that in the diet of my family. So I think that kind of covers it overall. And if you're going to adopt this lifestyle, please do, let us know how it goes and how it affects your health.
Definitely. Let's go to Zorro. How can erectile dysfunction be remedied or alleviated?
Well, erectile dysfunction is a problem that we should not need to talk about, because no one should experience it. But there certainly are a number of causes. And once again, it's important to investigate what is the underlying cause. So one simple thing to think about is with relationship to waking up with an erection, okay, which is called, penile tumescence. So if you wake up with an erection, which is, a common thing for men, and it's not a sexual thing necessarily, it may be to prevent them from peeing themselves while sleeping. But if you ever wake up with an erection, but are unable to have an erection during a sexual experience, then that tells you that it's most likely a psychological issue. And so that's something you can consider and look into it. Now, even if there is a purely or mostly physical cause, there's always going to be a psychological component, because this obviously affects our opinion and our ability to function as men, and for our purpose to procreate, one of our purposes here as human beings. So with respect to physical causes, this is often thought of as a blood vessel problem, because it is kind of a plumbing situation to create a physical erection, right? That the blood gets shunted and kind of fills up these cavities in the penile tissue, and that gives it the mechanical stiffness of the erection. So anything that would interfere with that process, and it could be something in the blood vessels, it could be something related to the nerves there. For example, many men who have a variety of surgeries for prostate related conditions and others often have damage to, I believe it might be the pudendal nerve, but it could be a different name that impairs erectile function as well. So you really need to determine the underlying cause and then address that directly.
All right, let's go to John Wienerker. The True Masculinity Fellowship is mostly health related. But I already purchased the detox program, fast, etc. I'm fairly healthy. What other benefits would I expect if I participate?
Well, we'll be discussing, other issues that are not directly health related, but with respect to the health issues, even if you're already healthy, there still could be some long-term risks. So you'll learn about how you can, prevent any things from getting worse in the future, and worry about then longevity and quality of life. Instead of, am I going to be at risk for, cancer or heart disease down the road, even though I feel great and I'm very healthy right now. But I'm also going to get into things like athletic performance, how to deal with acute and chronic sports-related injuries. We're going to get into family relationships and other aspects of what it's like to be a man. And then, of course, we have, in addition to, the lectures that I'm going to give on these topics and the monthly interactive group consultations and Q&As, and of course, some guest speakers with expertise on masculinity related topics of importance. There's also our peer community. And of course, I'm going to be paying some attention to that, but mostly it's an opportunity for you guys to come together in fellowship around these issues, so that you can support each other, provide resources for each other for new knowledge, and stimulate your engagement and thought around this, and make important connections, because we always accelerate our personal growth and development when we do it inside of a community with others who are doing the same. And that's really the type of man who is right for this fellowship, is someone that is on a journey of improvement and development they plan to be a lifelong pursuit. And this is a platform really for that type of fellowship.
Absolutely. Excellent. Let's get to Miguel. If I subscribe at some point, do I get access to previous monthly lectures?
Yes, all the content that's available is going to be archived and available for replay. And we have a very rapid turnaround after the lectures occur, and all of the downloadable materials like the protocols or any other bonus materials that we create will continue to be available for all members of the fellowship, and will be archived. And then when we, repeat, so we're going to, of course, have a core curriculum and then add some other topics, but we're going to update and repeat the core curriculum over time. So those, once there's new information available, then those will then be, take the place of the archived lectures. But there'll be, essentially a full curriculum available with all of the protocols that will continue to always be available once it's released.
All right. Question from Cortez. What's your approach to treating gynecomastia? Please apologize me if I mispronounce that. I feel like I've tried everything.
That's all right. It's gynecomastia is the way to pronounce it.
Gynecomastia. I'll remember that.
Yes. And so, once again, and this is really a guiding principle of how I approach health, is that for every problem, we always want to identify the underlying cause of the issue. And here what we have is, a proliferation of breast tissue, right, in a man, which is not the normal physiology. And we know that this tissue is predominantly fatty. So that gives us a good clue that most likely what's going on here is that there is fat soluble toxins involved, and that they likely are estrogenic in some way, because the breast tissue responds to hormones. And that's how, for example, mothers after they give birth start to produce milk, right, because of hormonal signals. So if we have xenoestrogen chemicals in our body, the fat soluble kind most likely could have turned on this signal in our own breast tissue and then caused proliferation and more deposition of fat and storing these toxins to sort of perpetuate the cycle, because these types of toxins have been shown to accumulate and in the body and have a very, very long half-lives. And these could be things that we were exposed to even in our own mother's womb, because these things get passed down that way. Even they also get passed through the breast milk, and then also it could be related to things that we've been exposed to. And in the number 3 episode of my True Masculinity mini course, I talked about those xenoestrogens at length, so you can go back and review that lecture to see if any of those things might be what you were exposed to that might have been the cause. Now, there are some additional things that I might not have mentioned, including certain types of pharmaceuticals, et cetera, that can also contribute to this. And of course, there's nutritional factors, especially things related to seed oils and phytoestrogens and soy products and the like. So the approach I would have would be to, one, eliminate exposure, and then undergo a specific targeted detox protocol that would both address this issue like throughout your body, but also focus specifically on the breast tissue. So there would be some probably healing solvent, for example, that you would apply right to the breast tissue itself, along with the protocol to specifically help reduce and reverse this issue without having to resort to things like surgery.
All right. IMF is asking, can turpentine oil massage on the groin area cause heavy periods with no clots, stop premenstrual cramps, and restore normal cycle length? All this happened after trying it in a luteal stage, 3 years on TCC.
All right. I'm not sure what TTC is, but it's hard to say exactly what happened here. But certainly, if you start using turpentine to detox certain things, you can have a cleansing reaction. So let's say that there was a buildup of fat-soluble toxins in the vaginal and uterine tissue, and then the turpentine got in there and started to dissolve that. Well, then as it became dissolved, of course, the body could respond by purging it. So that, could certainly be. I wish we, had the ability to test the fluid for the chemicals that might have been coming out. There actually is, and I recently reviewed this, I believe, in my fertility live stream, where there has been fluid menstrual products examined for certain types of chemical pollutants that were endocrine disrupting, and they have been shown to be there. So this certainly could be. But by the way, this is not the typical way that I, talk to people about dealing with heavy menstrual periods and such. I think, doing a general detox protocol and also using things like enemas, water enemas during the period and the premenstrual phase can really help alleviate some of the symptoms. And I'm not even sure that that's what is the situation with this question, but hopefully that answers the question.
All right. Let's go to a question that I saw earlier with regards to stents, I believe. Forgive me. Is it all? Let's go to Lil Willow instead. Is it true that men lose large quantities of zinc through ejaculation?
Well, I'm not really sure of the exact quantity. I know there is zinc in men's ejaculate, but zinc is something that it's one of the trace minerals, and many of us are deficient in the trace minerals. So regardless of how many ejaculations a man has, I think it would be imperative to make sure that you have trace mineral sources in your diet. And unless you're growing your own food, it would be next to impossible to get all these minerals from food. So something like Shilajit, as we discussed earlier, or fulvic minerals would be adequate ways to get minerals, including zinc.
All right, let's go to the stent question I finally found. Once stents are in, can they be removed?
Well, what goes in can always come out, so they can. The question would be, would you want to risk that? And would you find an interventional cardiologist who would willingly do that? Because, in order to put them in, you have to undergo catheterization. And that includes using, dye and fluoroscopy for the imaging, right? Which is like a continuous X-ray. So you're getting a much bigger dose of radiation than you would just doing like a chest X-ray, for example. So in addition to the radiation exposure, they're going to, go into, I believe the artery in your groin, most likely, and, put a big catheter that's going to go all the way up to your heart, in the arteries in your heart, that would be required to remove it. So I know that there are some things that do get removed, like occasionally if they get infected, right, they would remove a stent, or this similarly for like a greenfield filter, which is sometimes put in with people with a lot of blood clots or a hypercoagulable state. And that can be a focus of infection as well. So I think unless there's a circumstance like that, I don't think that it would be worth the risk, or that you would find a doctor who would necessarily even be willing to do it.
All right, let's go to Truth Seeker. Would you please tell me why I must use sugar when ingesting turpentine? Thank you.
Well, there is no must really. You don't necessarily have to do it that way. There are alternatives, but that is a time-honored traditional way that has resulted in good effect, and that's why it's probably the most talked about way. But it's also possible to mix it with like a carrier oil, which could be something like castor oil, or recently I've discovered through similar Ayurvedic recipes that it can be effectively administered by mixing it with clarified butter, or which may also be known as ghee. So there are a variety of ways to do it. If you look on, for example, the Library of Congress archives and search for turpentine, you'll find lots of medical textbooks from the 19th century that will describe a myriad of different ways of administering turpentine. So that's another place you can look and get additional ideas about things that you might, be interested in experimenting with, or you might say, I'll just go back to the sugar or castor oil or ghee.
All right. Shall we take a few more, or do you say let's do one more and then close it off?
Let's do two more.
All right, then. Let's go to Shalom Brother. Thoughts on semen retention or circulating sexual energy? So I think this is regarding the thesis that you can sublimate your sexual energy in that way.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of mixed opinions on that, because of what is the sacred role, but and there may be different ways of interpreting this in both a spiritual and a physiologic context. So some men have described experiences doing this and have felt it to be beneficial and powerful. I think if you want to read further on this, you might consider looking at David Data's book, which the title of escapes me right now. But I don't have a strong opinion on this. Like, I don't think that it's a necessary practice for true masculinity purposes. But I also think that we definitely do need to look at our sexual behavior a lot more carefully and recognize, why that gift is given to us and why we have such a drive to pursue that and to make good and careful decisions out there. And especially when there's a risk of pregnancy, that we, make sure that we are responsible, that we don't get into a situation that we're not willing to follow through with and meet all the obligations inquired.
All right, let's go to a strange name. What works for relief of benign and large prostates, increase flow and reduce a need to go?
Yeah, well, what I think is the cause of these enlarged prostate and problems is largely related to the prostate's proximity to the rectum. And that many of us may be constipated and holding on to stool, which is trying to excrete a variety of toxins that we're exposed to, that there's only a thin layer of tissue between that rectum and the prostate. And the prostate is kind of like a torus or donut shaped organ that in the middle is actually part of the urethra. So the urine flows through the middle of the prostate. And when it swells up or enlarges, it can block off that urinary flow. And those are the symptoms that unfortunate men experience once they have this issue. So what I think happens is that chronically over time, as stool sits in the rectum, that some of those toxins essentially migrate, by diffusion, perhaps, right into the prostate and end up being stored there. And additionally, there may be the possibility that toxins that are being secreted in the urine could also accumulate, that they may be a little bit more vulnerable than other parts of the urethra, perhaps. These are, my hypotheses. And so by correcting any constipation and making sure that there's good, brisk bowel flow, and doing some general cleansing, which is really going to be part of the healing for most of these health problems. But then, specifically targeting that area, because there is this area of skin between the testes and the anus, right, known as the perineum, and although it has many names in the colloquial vernacular, that you can easily penetrate from there to the prostate. So you can use various healing solvents to help detoxify that prostate so it can shrink back down and you can reestablish normal urinary function. Alexander, I think you're muted.
My sincerest apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, there we go. So what I was saying was excellent. That was it for all the questions. So don't forget to check out the True Masculinity Fellowship in the chat and in the description below for more content on men's health and increasing testosterone and science applied to physical exercise and hair regrowth and much more exciting stuff being in there. So make sure to check out the link. Andy, do you have any final remarks before we close it off?
Well, just want to put a shout out there to people who may be in South Dakota this coming weekend for the Red Pill Expo. I'll be there in person giving a talk, actually all about the xenoestrogens. So it'll be like the third episode of the mini series, but a little bit longer of a lecture. And I look forward to seeing everyone back next week for another Healthy Living live stream.
All right, everybody. Cheers. See you next time.